if you come in there, and it was take no prisoners. Who could wreak the most harm to the other side? Who could outreact the other? I mean, it was tough, two-fisted chess.
Well done, Mayor, but I counter with this negotiated majority. Then take this grassroots support. I maintain my majority. And I file a suit in court. But the decision is in my favor. You may have prevailed at this juncture, Vidoliak, but I will assiduously pursue your disestablishment. Perhaps, Mayor, but to do so, you must use the dark side of the clout. You must make deals and compromises. Never!
Harold was as tough and as hard-nosed a politician as you're ever going to find. He was cold. And that is not to denigrate him in any fashion. If you're going to survive in the business of politics, it's, as Harold used to say, politics ain't beanbags. And that's absolutely true. You're either going to play the game to its fullest or you're going to die in the game.
Talent in the wrong head. A vicious, angry man. Therein lies the rub. An absolute head-to-toe, unmitigated, full-fleshy hustler.
Some of the things that I did in those days, if I had the ability to change them, I probably would. But that's not life. You can't go back and change.
Signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Meeting's adjourned.
But it was rough, though. A lot of people were hurt. We had to do things that were, I remember we had to threaten to shut down our airport. We actually put in a doomsday shutdown plan. I mean, we took the city on one hell of a white knuckle ride for a year and a half. I mean, we scared America. I mean, it was a take no prisoners kind of a war. But we had to, because we were up against some adversaries who did not give us any quarter. And we had to win. And we did win.
And Alderman Vidoliak, who was the leader of the 29, rose, and the mayor glared at him and said, "For what purpose does the alderman in the 10th Ward rise?" And he says, "Mr. President, I just want to thank you." He says, "Thank me for what?" Well, a horse ran an aqueduct named Harold, and he won. So I just wanted to thank you for the tip. And everybody laughed, of course. And after the laughter subsided, Harold said, "If you were a gentleman, you would share your winnings." And of course, everybody laughed. And after they finally stopped laughing, Vidoliak said, "That's all I've been trying to tell you for 3 years."
We inherited a city which was not bankrupt, but in tremendous fiscal strain, long-standing fiscal stress, the rate maker said. We cleaned it up in 3 years, balanced the budget, laid off 8,000 people, got a good cash flow, changed the accounting system, and wound up with an increased bond rating. First time in 30 years the city had it.
People in Washington were asking me about balancing the federal budget, and they said, "Isn't that hard?" And I said, "That's nothing compared to balancing the Chicago city budget." So I said, members of Congress don't wear guns in the chamber, and in the city council, there were a lot of guns there that weren't being worn by active police officers.
1986 began with bad news. An FBI sting called Operation Incubator had snared several Washington officials and aldermen in a bribery scandal.
The U.S. attorney, who at that time was a man named Anton Valukas, that was a Republican, sent in a mole who was a murderer, who had been involved in all kinds of crimes, who had been investigated for murders in Wisconsin and Florida, and in fact was going to be, to my understanding, indicted in Florida until they came and got him, because he said he had some connections that he could go to Chicago and get Harold Washington.
They sent him into Chicago to try and, in effect, entrap some people on the mayor's staff. And in fact, they entrapped some aldermen. He spread money among some of the people in the mayor's administration.
And they indicted a number of people, myself included. And they tried to get to Harold. They asked me to get to Harold, quite frankly. And of course, you know, my response to that was no way.
Harold always was confident that that of his own integrity. He was never in politics for money. He was never in it for contracts. He was never looking for an inside deal for himself, and so that he had a confidence that carried through that that no matter what anyone was attempting to do to him, whether it was bug him or entrap him, that he didn't have anything to fear because he hadn't done anything wrong.
The mayor had to terminate a department head, and I think that there were at least 2 or 3 aldermen who were indicted and sent to prison as a result of that. Again, that was what I thought was a targeting of a very popular African-American mayor by the federal government.
Then, suddenly it seemed all the winds were in Harold Washington's column. Citing the Voting Rights Act that Washington had passed when he was in Congress, federal judges redistricted Chicago's wards. Minority voters got more aldermen, and the mayor won control of the city council. The mayor's reforms were finally voted on, and power was now firmly in the hands of Harold Washington.
Harold Washington was a reform mayor, and people forget that. The first reform mayor in our modern history. Reform meant a lot of things, and I think what people want to do, particularly those who hated him, that now say nice things about him, is they want to leave the legacy of Harold Washington around personality, that he was bright, which he was, that he was articulate, that he was funny, that he was all these things, and he was all that and more. But the primary reason that Harold Washington was able to put together that coalition, and the primary reason that people all over the world still respect him, is that he had an agenda.
The mayor was absolutely committed to both racial and gender equality.
He had given more positions in City Hall to women, Latinos, more blacks than had ever been the case. I mean, positions of power.
No one, but no one in this city, no matter where they live or how they live, is free from the fairness of our administration. We'll find you and be fair to you wherever you are.
But Jane Byrne and Ed Berdoliak were still on the scene.
Jane Byrne had returned. Jane had a tremendous capacity for reinventing herself, and she had done a nice job of that in the months leading up to the mayoral primary. And so going into that race, it was really a serious race, the primary.
As the current mayor and the previous mayor escalate their views of the past 8 years, the 3 other candidates seem to be left in the wind. That is Mr. Berdoliak, Mr. Hines, and myself.
How are you?
I remember sitting in Harold's office the day after the primary, and we were all exultant. And then Harold got somewhat melancholy, and he said, you know, here we are, I got 20% of the white vote, and we're happy about that because that was a breakthrough for us. He said, well, you know, I think I earned more than 20% of that vote. And he kind of paused. He said, ain't it a bitch to be a black man in the land of the free and the home of the brave?
But once that was over, most of the aldermen who had been part of the 29, who won re-election in '87, basically gave up. And Washington had a solid majority of 35 or 40 aldermen.
When people like me and others say, you know, Mr. Mayor, maybe you don't realize it, man, but you just gained about 25 pounds, you know. You take care of my security, you know, I'm taking care of me. And over a period of time, when you can defy your doctors and don't make your doctor appointments, when you don't buy your suits off the rack anymore, you know, people are making them for you. When you don't realize that eating late at night and then holding an hour conversation with somebody about some personal problem that further drains you from a full day's activity, and then go to bed, that has a toll. It takes a toll over a period of time.